Welcome to the Athlete Insights Podcast, hosted by Yash Padhye, a podcast focused on letting athletes tell their journeys in their sport. This podcast is presented by Boxed Water. Boxed water is better.
Welcome into another episode of the Athlete Insights Podcast. Today I've got Olivia Huffman, my guest. She's a former softball player at Ball State. She now works in science at Eli Lilly, you said. And I know you have your own softball coaching academy, something along the lines I saw of that. So I appreciate you kind of taking the time. And no, it's late tonight, but yeah, I appreciate you taking the time and joining me here, Olivia.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So can you talk about we'll go back from the beginning here. So can you talk about when you first kind of picked up a bat and started playing softball?
Yeah, I started playing. So it's a funny story. I grew up playing soccer, but I never wanted to play but rec soccer. I liked not having to go anywhere. I just show up to the same field every week. I kick around the soccer ball. I played from when I was like 5 to when I was, 7 or 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And my mom was in charge of signing me up for said soccer clinic, rec ball in the summer. And she came back one day. She's like, Olivia, you're too old. They won't let you play recreational soccer anymore. You have to start doing like club traveling soccer. And she said, Olivia, I knew you didn't want to do that. So I signed you up for something different. I signed you up for softball. And I was like, Mom, like, I don't do that. I play soccer.
Yeah.
But I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I ended up really liking it. And so when I was like 9 and 10, I did rec ball.
Okay.
And I ended up loving it. And so I decided, let's try out for the traveling team. Let's try out for my local organization. And tried out as a 10, 11-year-old, and I made the A team. And that just sparked something in me. I just fell in love with the game. And, from there, it was just kind of a growing love and something that I never wanted to stop doing.
I gotcha. And that kind of, you touched on the soccer aspect there. That was kind of going to be kind of what I was going to ask you here. Did you play it outside of soccer? Was kind of, you said soccer was kind of your main focus before softball, but any other sports that you played throughout your childhood, throughout when you were younger?
Yeah, my parents were the best. I mean, they let me do anything and everything that I wanted to do. So in addition to sports, I did like acting classes, I did choir, I did dance, I did classes, I did soccer as a kid, and then as I got into middle school, I did volleyball, and then I did basketball in addition to softball, and my family did a little archery. And so I grew up playing some street hockey and some ice hockey on the street with brothers. And so I got this really cool exposure to a lot of different sports. My dad made my brothers play football, and so I had to go to some of their football games. They hated that. They ended up being runners, but I got this exposure to all different types of sports, which I thought was so fun. I just wanted to try everything, and my parents let me. So
no, that's super cool. Like if I see the parallel, my parents were kind of the same way. Kind of played every sport every season. Football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring. Kind of like I grew up playing that, so I kind of see the parallel there. I know.
Yeah.
Enjoying all of it. But is there any? You said you started when you were 9 or 10 playing rec in the rec softball leagues, and then going into traveling teams and looking at the traveling aspects with youth softball. But is there any kind of one core memory with youth softball specifically that stands out to you?
Yeah, so through, I would say like 10s, 12s, and 14U. So between the 10 to 14 age, we stuck with the same group of girls for our travel ball team, and really, really tight. And it was a very cool, close-knit group of girls and all of our family. And so I think the friendships, like just having these friends that were so silly, and none of us were at school together, but we all lived in the same city limits. So we all ended up playing on this same team, and we moved up together. I thought that was just so fun. Like the parents were great, and my teammates were great, and my coach was intense, but cared about us so much and loved the game so much. And I think just fostered really cool love for each other and love for the game. So I think the people is probably the core memory. Traveling to different travel ball tournaments. I remember we played one nationals in St. Louis, Missouri. That was the furthest I've ever gone at that point, furthest away from Minnesota. And it was just really, really cool. We were staying in the hotel and traveling, going to our games at the field, and we were with teams from Georgia and Kentucky and all of these other places that we normally only played teams from Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin. So that was really, really fun.
No, that had to be that, like you said, making those memories and we're building those relationships. That's what's kind of sports unifies and brings together in that regard. So that's cool to hear. So kind of want to jump now into kind of your high school career. Can you talk about that a little bit, your experience throughout high school playing softball?
Yeah. High school, like my high school age, there were kind of two different softball experiences that I had. So there was that actual high school program, and then the travel ball program that I did during high school. So high school season was from like March to May, and then June, July, and August I did travel ball.
Yeah.
And I would say high school ball is so different, right? Because in club, you build these super teams and you get all the best players and you play at a high level. And with high school, it's whoever goes to your high school and tries out for the team.
Yeah.
And so the level is different. You have people who don't really care that much. They just play for fun. You've got people like me who play for fun. And the fun part is competing with everybody else. Like, let's make it as like, let's
competitive
do the best
as possible.
Yeah. And so I think there were like all these different levels, but I thought that was actually really cool because it would be it's players that I maybe normally wouldn't get to be on a team with. And you get to have people from all these different levels that come together, and you got to make something work, and you got to figure out how to play for each other and build a really cool program. And I'm so the high school softball experience for me is so special because I got to be on the team in 8th grade. I didn't play, but I got to be on the team in 8th grade. So I made the team. And that was the first time I was ever around people that were that much older than me. So the seniors that year were 5 years older. And I think that was like a pretty intimidating experience, but overall really good for my growth and kind of gave me a foot in the door for the program. And that's when I started kind of doing the coaching clinics with them. So we would all do like a team clinic. The players would coach it, and a bunch of youth players, 8 to 12, from the area and come learn some softball skills. And so I think that was really cool. And then just growing in my role there, I was behind, as a 9th grader, I played center field. I'm a catcher by trade, but I played center field because our catcher at the time was Taylor LeMay, who was the starting catcher for 3 years at the University of Minnesota. So she was very, very good. And so I got to learn from her. She was a senior that year.
Yeah.
And I got to just help build the culture and help learn what it meant to be part of a team where people move on every year. You have seniors that graduate, which before was always on the same little travel ball team where we all up together. And so this was kind of that rotation that was my first taste of that, which I saw a lot more of in college. And then I got to be a captain my sophomore, junior, and senior year. And that was a huge privilege too, just to be able to like almost shepherd the younger girls. Like there were a couple girls, like Sydney Zaverall was an incredible catcher, and she was an 8th grader on the varsity team when I was a senior.
Oh, wow.
And just like great kid with a ton of talent, and just trying to make sure that she knew how to get better at softball.
Yeah.
And then also just making sure that she had somebody there to encourage her and believe in her, because I know that meant a lot to me when I was younger. Having some of the upperclassmen believe in me and have my back, being able to be that for someone else too was a special experience.
And it's crazy how you only need really one person to believe in your ability to kind of push you forward. So it's great that you say that in that regard. And it seems like you had like a great whirlwind of a high school career with the travel team and with your the high school team and kind of going through that route. But I'm always curious. So I played high school golf when I was in high school. Didn't get recruited. None of that happened on that regard. I'm always curious when I talk to athletes about their recruiting process and kind of how they went about getting to where they were. So can you kind of talk to me about that and talk to me about kind of like how was your recruiting process, and then how did you end up choosing Ball State, or what was your rationale for going with Ball State versus?
Yeah, I think my journey is very unique. I think it's important to point out that I graduated high school in 2015.
Yeah.
And I think it's like a really interesting time. And I don't think it's comparable to really anything else, because I was like getting recruited in a time where social media was just starting to be a thing, but was not used for recruiting.
Yeah.
Like today, you see every prospect, every high school girl that plays softball has a softball Twitter page where they say right-handed pitcher, class of 2026. This is my height and this is my velocity, and then they tag all the college coaches. It's like instant to these college coaches on a public platform. I didn't have that, and much less I didn't know that college softball was a thing until like 7th or 8th grade. Like I had no idea. It would be fun to play and compete, try and get as good as we could. But it was never a thought for me to be like, oh, I want to play in college, that's why I'm playing this travel ball, because I didn't even know it existed. And in Minnesota, there's not D1 schools. Like now they have St. Thomas as another Division 1 that started, I think, a couple of years ago, but before that was Division 3. So that was the school I knew about. I was like, okay, small school, like that seems fine. And the only Division 1 school that we knew about, that we had, was the University of Minnesota. Now I know that's a Big Ten school. The Big Ten's a great conference, has very good funding. And so their facilities, their fan base, everything is very like, it's very cool. It's a very cool experience to go to any school in the Big Ten. Especially to play there. But I didn't know that. And so through my recruiting process, I started getting recruited in like my junior year. And that was the first year that my family was able to afford to have me on like a fancy club team, because some of the club teams are very expensive. They're thousands of dollars a year. And, you know, we had a big family. We couldn't swing it. So my dad got this job at an airline so we could travel for free. And so then we could make it work. But so that was like the team that you go to get recruited in college. It was kind of like my 9th and 10th grade year that my friends started getting recruited. And I was like, oh boy, I'm behind. Like, I didn't even know about this. I didn't even know I was supposed to be doing this, like getting recruited. I had no idea. I would go to camps for fun, but I didn't go to college camps to get recruited. I felt like I was behind. And, you know, then I was at this winter camp in Rosemont, Minnesota, that my coach put on every winter. And there was a coach there from the University of South Dakota. And so I ended up getting connected with her, and she asked me to come on a visit. And so I did. I came to a camp, I came on a visit, and she said, we'd like to offer you 85% athletic scholarship and 15% academic. So full ride. And I was like, awesome. It's a Division 1 school. Sweet. And they want me this bad. Fantastic. And in hindsight, and you know, I was excited, and who wouldn't be? And I didn't have anybody that was necessarily shepherding me through this process. I kind of showed up. I was like, oh, I bet, like I get to play Division softball. Let's go. I know this was a few years ago.
Super excited. Yeah.
And then I went on a visit at North Dakota State, and you know, I was like, oh, you know, they're pretty good too, but South Dakota's second in the conference, like they're pretty good. And so I ended up accepting the offer from South Dakota. And in hindsight, I rushed into it. It was a generous offer, and I didn't see any red flags from South Dakota necessarily, but I would say I rushed into it. And my only regret is that I wish I had somebody there that knew the ropes, that said, you know what, take a beat, wait 6 months, you're not behind. Because I felt behind, and I wasn't. I was happy through my junior year. I wasn't behind. I had 6 or 8 more months until I needed to start looking at some real decisions. And I had that much time. So that was kind of my one regret. So I ended up going to the University of South Dakota for my freshman year. And it was not quite the right fit for me. The coaching and the players, it didn't gel the way I wanted it to. And that was me, 18-year-old me, had a lot of character flaws. First to admit that one for sure. But then also the team just wasn't a place where, you know, I felt loved or included, or I felt like other people wanted me to be a part of it. And that's tough, because, you know, that's just it can be hard to gauge how to fix that, right? Because really, really isolating and lonely me.
And you want to go somewhere where you feel like the right fit, right? And a lot of people say like
Yeah.
when you step on the campus or wherever you step at your job, you know it's
Right.
the right fit when you go there. So yeah, no, I totally get it, you know.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, and the thing that was scary about that is this was pre-portal. So it was
oh,
not easy to transfer. I didn't understand the process. I didn't know the process. I
gotcha.
just remember going to one of our athletic administrators sobbing, saying, I think I'd like to ask for my release. And I'm sobbing.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my gosh, okay, like I'll ask your coach, because our coach got to decide whether we were released or not.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, long story short, getting my letter of release, and I needed to, figure out where I was going to play, because I had just given up a whole scholarship
Yeah.
and I didn't know what I was going to do.
Uh-huh.
And it was honestly by the grace of God. There's no other explanation for it. I'd been coaching a team that summer, a travel ball team,
Uh-huh.
the Midwest Speed, and one of the old coaches came by for practice one time. I didn't
Okay.
know him. He had just coached the team before I got there.
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh, hey, what's your name?" Like, I was explaining my situation a little bit, and his name was Jesse Valerit, and he's the coach at a D3 near my house,
Mhm.
Bethel University in St. Paul. And he said, "Oh man, I wish I could help you, but I only know one Division I coach. Like, I barely know anybody, but it was my buddy from when we played on Team USA,
Mhm.
or men's fast pitch." And so I said, "Oh, if you wouldn't mind giving him a call, that'd be great." And I get a call 2 weeks later from Jesse saying, "Yo, my buddy had this catcher that was supposed to be coming to Ball State this fall, just pulled out. She wants to stay in Iowa." This is midway through July. School starts in a
Oh,
month.
yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "Can you send film?" So I said, "Yeah, you bet." I was in Colorado at a tournament, coaching a tournament.
Oh,
So I get
wow.
2 days later, I call my friend. I'm like, "Can you come to our local field and help me make a video?" It's so embarrassing. I put this film to Mr. Brightside. I edited it on iMovie. Like, it looks terrible. The girls today would be like, "That's so embarrassing. Like, why
Yeah.
didn't you make it on TikTok or whatever?" I don't know. It looks so, it's still so funny to go back and watch it on my YouTube channel. But I sent it
Yeah.
over, and then I get a call the next day saying, "Hey, paperwork went through. Can you come on a visit?" And I said, "Yeah, can I come tomorrow?" And he said, "Yeah." So my family and I all hopped on a plane and we went to Muncie, Indiana.
Yeah.
Um, and so then, the rest is history. It ended up being the perfect fit for me and that coaching staff. Yeah. His friend, long story short, is Josh Johnson, who was my
Oh.
pitching coach for the 3 years that I was at Ball State.
Oh,
So
wow.
very, very cool connection, kind of just random. Like I said, God was orchestrating all of that.
Yeah.
Never did it like that myself. And so it was very, very cool. Very cool fit.
Crazy how all that works and
Yeah.
it goes through and it's always, I mean, it's fun because like you think about like when we graduate, I mean, I graduated in 2015 as well,
Hmm.
as in the same class as yourself.
Yeah.
And just to see kind of how that's evolved now, especially with the
So,
portal and now with NIL, like
yeah.
how I always like tell athletes, or athletes always tell me like, or the people that I've talked to always will be like, I wish, or I a good buddy of mine is Trey Moses, who's the
Yeah.
center when we were there at Ball State.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
he always says like, oh, I wish I had NIL
Man,
and
we could have gotten
portal.
rich.
Yeah, when I was
That would
playing, I wish I had it, and I was like, no, I know, like that would have been cool to like, be a part of that when that was there. But no, it's crazy, like you said, now to see kind of how that's changed and how like softball, baseball, football, soccer, like they all have their little Instagram pages and
hmm
X pages and it's
Yeah.
always like and it's crazy to see how that's evolved, especially with the
Well,
portal too. Like,
yeah. And I think an important thing to note too is the growth of women's sports in the
yeah,
last 5 years or so has been
yeah,
incredible. I think like seeing the way the sport of softball has grown,
yeah,
because people push so hard to get their games on ESPN, and
yeah,
increase visibility was really cool. What the
yeah,
University of Nebraska did with their volleyball program,
yeah.
breaking the record for number in
They were in
attendance.
Memorial Stadium, yeah.
Yeah,
You see, I mean, even what Caitlin Clark's doing right now and with
yep,
Iowa, like it's
incredible.
wild
Yeah.
to see kind of the hyper growth of how that's been
Mhm.
and it's been great to see again, just like, and I've been in our athletic department here, been at Ball State, and and it's like it's so different now. You see people just like hitting the transfer portal left and right,
Crazy.
right.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh wow, like this wasn't. And then I got to remind myself, like this wasn't a thing like 5 years ago.
It
Like,
was, and it's crazy to think, a lot of stuff
yeah,
happened. I think like with internet and TikTok exploding the way it did,
yeah,
and then COVID hitting the way it did,
yeah,
all at the same time that we were graduating college, I think makes it a little hard for me to gauge what exactly is the culprit for things being so different.
yeah,
But it's probably a combination. It is, I think the transfer portal is a double-edged sword. A lot
yeah,
of times it's making, it's bigger space between the haves and the have-nots. I think same
yeah,
with the NIL, it has the potential to maybe do some damage to mid-majors or smaller schools.
yeah,
But I think overall it's really important to the players, because we got to keep the players at the front of our minds, right? Like
yeah.
protecting the players and making sure they're
It's
in a situation
important.
they want to be in,
Yeah,
and they're getting, everything they want to get out of the 4 years. It's a very short time, 4 years
yeah,
that they get to play in college. So
yeah.
overall, I think it's really positive.
No, it's been a very positive growth, like
Yeah.
incrementally positive growth over the years.
Mhm.
And it's been great to see. And like you said, especially with women's sports and how it's grown,
Mhm.
overall it's been great to see. And so you mentioned, and I knew you'd spent a year in South Dakota before you came to Ball State. But
Uh-huh.
how was it like? What was the one question I'll ask on the transition here from high school to college is, what's the biggest change that you saw from playing in high school versus when you ended up at South Dakota and you played for the University of South Dakota your freshman year? What was the biggest change in that transition?
That's a really good question. I think, again, this is probably different in different programs,
Uh-huh.
but the biggest thing I can say is people aren't going to look out for you. Um, there's this element of you're on your own now,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have your parents looking out for you. It's not your parents that you go home to every night,
Yeah.
or your siblings or the people that you've grown up with,
Yeah.
be it teammates or classmates or anything like that. And, you know, um, it wasn't like my coach's main priority was making sure I felt comfortable. That wasn't her main priority. Her main
Mhm.
priority is to run a softball program.
Yeah.
And, my teammates, I wasn't their main priority either. They had classes and lifting, and some of them had clinicals because they were nursing students. I mean, there are
Mhm.
100 things that they were dealing with too.
Yeah.
And so I would say that like that was the starkest or most kind of like abrupt thing, was like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
there, like no one else is looking out for me. I got to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that was a really important thing for me to experience going into, and this is an even longer conversation, but going
Yeah.
into being someone at Ball State where we
Yeah.
got freshmen in every year. I
Mhm.
think um, it was really important to me to make it be a space where they weren't on their own. And it is going to be different. It's a transition being away from home and being away from a support system, especially
Yeah.
if you're far away from home.
Yeah.
But I wanted them to know they had somebody that liked them,
Yeah.
somebody that loved them, and somebody that was going to have their back. Um, so I think that's like a difficult thing, and that's difficult with anyone undergoing that kind of transition.
Yeah.
But I think it was more than I even expected.
No, and yeah, no, it's crazy to see like especially I know you said you're from Minnesota coming
Mhm.
to Muncie. That had to be such a stark change in environment. And then like you see some of these athletes like cross country guys from Massachusetts are playing at UCLA and in
Mhm.
California, and you're far, far away from home. So it's great to see kind of bringing that.
You know what, Yash? I'm glad you brought that up, because going to Vermilion, I don't know if you guys have, or anyone watching this has been to Vermilion, South Dakota.
Yeah.
I grew up in the suburbs of St. Paul. Like we had everything you needed. Our suburb was maybe 60,000 people, but then St.
Yeah.
Paul's Vermilion.
Mhm.
Vermilion, 10,000 people, one
Wow.
stoplight, a
Yeah.
Walmart, and an Ace Hardware. I was like,
What?
hey,
Yeah.
not a coffee shop. Like, there's nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that just added insult to injury. I was like, man, I already don't have any friends. Now I can't even
Yeah.
go get a coffee. But yeah, that was definitely
That's yeah, that's
I
wild.
will tell you, Muncie felt like the big city when I moved there. It felt like the big city compared to Vermilion.
Oh wow. Yeah. No, I think Muncie had like 60, 70,000, I think, right?
Yeah, they had a Michael's, Joanne's,
Yeah.
hobby,
So
Chick-fil-A.
yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's definitely like you said, different in terms of when you're moving around the country and kind of. I feel that way sometimes being here in Colorado. It's like, shoot, like you talk about like people having your back or like people
Mhm.
like you can trust. And it's like my parents are all the way back in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Friends that I like close friends I know are all back in Tennessee, so it feels a little different or lonely, you could say at times, where you're like, oh
Yeah.
shoot, like you're out here by yourself and doing things by yourself. But it's has its positives and its negatives there too. But that's
Well,
the
yeah, and just one other little thing to add on to that is, like
yeah.
you said before, it only takes one. It takes
Yeah.
one person to believe in you. It takes one person to love you. It takes one person for you to feel like, you know what, maybe it's not so bad. And
Oh yeah.
for me, like I had one friend from, I think we met in speech class or something freshman year. Her name's Casey, and she's my best friend from that year.
Yeah.
And she was awesome, and she's the reason that it wasn't so bad. And we
Yeah.
went together, and she's still my friend today. And so I think like that's an important thing to remember too, is like if you are undergoing this kind of transition,
Mm-hmm.
shoot for one. Like you don't have to shoot for a bunch of friends. Shoot
Yeah.
for one really good connection,
Yeah.
and it's not immediate, but it's worth it.
Worth it. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So can you talk now about kind of now like I said, you said you made that transition from
Mhm.
Vermilion down to Muncie, and kind of that change there. But can you talk about kind of I asked you about a core memory from youth softball.
Mhm.
What's one core memory? I know there's probably a lot of memories that stand out to you with Ball State and the softball team there, but what's one kind of core memory that you would say really stands out from your collegiate career at Ball State?
This might be cheating because it takes multiple memories and puts them into one, but it's the
Oh, you're good.
people.
Yeah.
Bar none, the people. And I started like my best friend from college, Maddie Labrador. We would spend hours and hours hitting and fielding and doing
Uh,
all things softball all the time because we
yeah.
loved it. It wasn't a job to us. It wasn't work to us. It
Yeah.
was everything we wanted.
Uh-huh.
And we wanted to be champions more than anything else.
Mhm.
So what we ate and how we slept and when we went to treatment, bless our athletic trainers' hearts, they
Yeah.
put a lot of work into us.
Yeah.
But getting to spend time with her and then just the rest of my teammates, just man, we're so generous with like their love for me and how they cared about me, and it just was so special to me because I don't know, I didn't feel like I necessarily deserved it, but they went out of their way. I remember my first year, it was my birthday party. It was my birthday, and my freshman year I did not have a good birthday, but
Mm.
my sophomore year, it was my first time at Ball State. My dad surprised me, he flew in with a cake,
Oh, wow.
and then all my teammates that lived in our apartment complex came down and they lit candles and they sang happy birthday to me, and it was so, and then we all watched movies together. It was so fun.
Yeah.
And I think that like changed the trajectory of the relationships that I wanted, the
Mhm.
way that I wanted to be in this program,
Mhm.
the friendships I wanted to have, and the friend that I wanted to be to other people. I think that that is just a total turning point for me.
Yeah, I mean that story right there illustrates kind of like like we've been talking about kind of build like having those relationships and having those kind of
Huge.
friendships really are huge in
Yeah.
the rest of your life, and kind of having those for life, then you can reach out and connect with. I mean, you're in
Mhm.
San Diego, they might be in, Florida or
Yeah.
Texas, wherever, but you could still connect and
Yeah.
talk and have those connections for the rest of
Yeah.
your life. So that's super cool
So cool.
to hear. And so kind of want to turn it to you now, is like I always ask who I'm talking to is, if you were talking to a bunch of young girls who wanted to play softball or wanted to play at the next level, what kind
Mhm.
of I know we've kind of talked about the relationship building piece, but what's kind of one core piece of advice that you would give to young girls who are wanting to like play
Yeah.
softball at the next level?
Yeah, and I do some softball lessons on the side and stuff, and I tell all my girls like and not even telling them, but this is just like a core belief that I have is
Yeah.
none of it playing at the next level, getting a college scholarship, that ends up being a destination for so many people or a goal for so many people, so many
Yeah.
girls, so many parents. And I tell you what, college softball is really hard. College athletics, really hard. It's
Yeah.
really intense. It takes over your whole life. And sometimes it's not fun and sometimes it's not easy. There are going to be bumps in the road. And if you do not have a deep-seated love for the sport and desire to just play, it's not going to be fun in college. And sometimes, some people say that's my ticket to getting school paid for. And that's fair enough because you got to do what you got to do. And so I totally respect that. But I will say it's not easy. And so for people saying, oh, I just want to get a college scholarship, once I get a scholarship or once I get to college, then I'll be fine. I just have to make it till then. It's like, no, build a love for the game.
Yeah.
And spend time loving the game. And if that means you've got to spend some time away from the game so that you don't resent it, then do that. Spend time with your family. Go on family vacations in the summer. Don't starve yourself of that, because family's going to be there a long time after softball, hopefully. And your whole life is going to be there a lot longer than the sport. And that's a reason to lean into the sport and to love it more than anything while you still get to play it. But also it's a reason to say, you know what, I got to keep family first. I got to have a really good balance early in my life, because that kind of balance and that kind of almost maturity with how you spend your time and how you lean into softball in a healthy way, I think is going to pay them back a million times over.
It's great that you say that, because like I know, like I being at the doctoral level, doing a lot of research around athletics and college athletics and things of that nature, I've seen kind of you look at like the ages of which young kids specialize and how much they're pushed into, by parents, by peers, by others, to like really just lock in focus to get a scholarship. And it's like you end up, like you said, losing the love of the game or losing an interest in the game. So it's interesting. And I love how you said that, like, if you need to take time away from the game, that's an important piece to it too. Like that's a key piece to, like, say, to have the maturity or have the knowledge to understand, like, hey, like I love playing softball, or I love playing volleyball, or I love playing whatever, but I need to take some time away and not think about it for a while. So that way, when I come back to it, I feel more refreshed and I can approach it. I can attack it at a more efficient level than I have been in the future. So that's a great kind of, like I love how you said that. So in terms of, because again, when you talk about the love of the game, I think that part gets missed, of like, sometimes you got to take time off and sometimes you got to reset and refocus and do other things. So
and sorry, one more thing I want to add to that is,
no, you're good.
Parents have a huge responsibility in this. So any parents that are watching or listening, like, I think some parents forget the amount of power that they have in their kids' heart and in their desires. I think it's, first of all, a parent's responsibility to protect their child as a child. I think creating a space where their child could say, hey, you know what? I don't think I want to play this sport anymore. And giving them the freedom to do that. And it doesn't mean you don't honor your commitment. I think my parents did a really good job with the balance of, you know what, you're going to honor your commitment to this team. And if at the end of the season you don't want to continue, then we won't continue. But I think I think a lot of parents can encourage their kids to do a little bit too much. And I think parents be really, really careful about that, because fostering a love of the game, it has to be like higher on the priority list than getting their kid more reps. I think parents need to protect the child's childhood all the way through. I mean, I would say until age 14 or 15, then you can start going really, really hard at softball. But don't do something that they don't want to do. Don't say, hey, I'm signing you up for lessons 3 days a week or once a week. That's a lot. Let your child lead the charge on that, and let them express their desire for it. And then hopefully, if you have the means and, whatever it is, you don't need money or fancy equipment to be able to put in the work. Support them if they do want to do that work. And then if there's somebody that wants to go overboard and wants to work too hard, then it's also a parent's responsibility to set some boundaries and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to be doing softball 7 days a week. We're going to do softball 4 days a week because your other 2 days you're going to be spending time with family. We're having family dinner this night, or we're going to church on Sundays, or whatever it is, whatever that is for your family, setting some boundaries to make sure that your child does not have the almost ability to burn themselves out.
Yeah. And that's I think that's the key there, is burning out. And a lot of kids, and especially having that, like you coach softball, having that coaching experience myself, you see some of those kids getting burnt out, not wanting to play, and things of that nature. So it's like I said, it's great that's great advice in terms of thinking at it from that perspective of what parents should do or could do to support, because parents do have number one of that responsibility of caring for their child, but then also a big influence on kind of how their kid goes about their life up until when they get to college. So
yeah, and how the kid looks at themselves, like knowing that they don't have to perform well at their sport to have you as a parent love or validation or approval, like having that approval or that validation just because you're their daughter or you're their son. Just having that because of that, I think, is really important for parents to communicate. Even if you think your kid knows that, I think it's really important to say that out loud, make it clear that, hey, you know, if you're saying something about bad performance during a game, I think saying out loud, but hey, you know what? That game wasn't your best, but it doesn't matter. I love you because you're my daughter.
Mhm.
You know, even if it does get a little bit heated, making sure that you're really, really intentional with the way that you communicate that person's value, that young person's value, because they're going to carry that for the rest of their lives.
For sure. For sure. So yeah, no, that's great. And it's great kind of advice there, Olivia, but it's all the time that we have for this episode of the Athlete Insights podcast. So I want to thank Olivia for coming on. I know, like I said again, it's a little later in the day, but want to thank you for coming on and spend some time with me talking about your career, kind of reflecting on careers. I know a lot of the athletes that I've talked to, they're kind of like, when we're playing or when we're in, we never get to reflect on kind of our career, reflect on kind of where we've gotten. And so this is great being able to talk with athletes, kind of reflect on, and former athletes like yourself, to kind of reflect on their careers and kind of go through that process. So I appreciate you coming on, and you can follow. I'll have your social media handles like I do on all my podcasts on the bottom, so you can follow Olivia. You follow myself, our podcast. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, pretty much everywhere. You can get podcast hosting. You'll find it on there. But Olivia, thank you so much again for taking the time, and
Thanks for
we'll see you
having me.
next time.